Hello everyone. In this video, I will show you on how to display data from MariaDB using PHP and Ionic. So let's start. Okay, so we have a blank project here. So we'll be displaying the data from our existing database, which is the DB CRUD, and then in our TBL student, we'll be displaying the content of this table, TBL student, in our Ionic application. So as you can see, we have two records on our table. So on our VS Code, we'll be opening the homepage.view, and then we'll be removing the default content, and we'll be changing that into Ion list. Ion item. Ion item. And then we'll be using the Axios as our HTTP library to get the data from our MySQL database. So in order to use the Axios in our application, we need to import the library of the Axios. So we'll be using the import statement, Axios from Axios, and then semicolon. And then we'll be creating a simple function to our project. So under methods, then colon, okay, then we'll be creating the methods which is load students, or we can say that is load record, but in this example we'll just use the load students as the name of our method. And then inside of our load students method, we'll be defining the Axios API. So we'll be using the post method. Then, so under post, the name of our, or the URL, and then dot, then okay, and then inside of then is the response, that will be the variable that we'll be using. Then equal sign, okay, and then after that we'll be using the catch statement, that catch, and then of course function error, that will be also a variable. Okay, then we'll be ending it with semicolon, and then okay, so let's say alert error. Okay, okay, the URL, then alert response dot data. Okay, and then we'll be adding the link of our API, which is the in our local machine, which is localhost slash CRUD app slash the name of the file that we're going to use to display the content of our database. So for the meantime, we'll be naming that as http localhost CRUD app list students.php. So in this example, list students.php is not yet existing, so we'll be creating that later on. So we have here the simple API that will get the value, or that will get the data from our database using the Axios library. Now we'll be creating this file in our htdocs folder. So let's try that. So we have here the CRUD app folder, and then we'll be creating a file which is liststudents.php that will serve as our script, where we are going to define our PHP script to retrieve or to get the data to our or from our database. So we'll be creating a file which is liststudents.php. So php, so in our application folder in PHP, we already have the db_connect.php file, which is, if you watch our videos about creating a connection to PHP and MariaDB, this is the file that we use there. So we'll be opening this file to check the name of the database. Okay, so the name of the database is dbcrud, the password, and the username. So we define here the connection using the PDO, or the PHP data objects. So we already have the connection. What we need to do now is just to create a file that will display the record from MySQL or from the MariaDB database. So we'll be requiring that file. So require, then the name of the file is db_connect.php. So for the meantime, we'll be saving that. So make it sure that the name of the file is list_.php. It should be the same with the file that we are going to create. Okay, so the type of the file is PHP, of course, and then save that as list_students.php. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we're going to extract, or we're going to select the data from our table, which is the TBL student. So we'll be using this SQL statement. So we'll be defining a variable which is SQL is equal to our SQL statement semicolon, and then we'll be using the try catch statement. So catch, and then under catch we'll be defining the PDO exception. Variable E, then whatever the error, will be displaying that. So let's prompt an error has been occurred. Then if you want to display this specific error, all you need to do is to append that letter E. So it will store the specific error regarding to your problem. And then, so in our try statement, inside of our try statement, we'll be creating or calling the function result, or we'll be defining variable result, then con, then prepare, then semicolon SQL. Then after that, we'll be executing the statement. So result, then we'll be using the or calling the execute statement. Execute. Then we will add a conditional statement, which is the if statement, to check if there is an existing record to our table. So result, then we'll be using the row count statement. Row counts is greater than 0. That means there is a record in our table. And then, of course, the next step is we'll be using the while statement. So while, so we're expecting for multiple records. So while, and then row is equal to result, then fetch, then PDO colon fetch. So we will be using the fetch associative array. So fetch ASOC. So that's it. And then, so in our Axios library, the data requirements is in JSON format. So we need to convert this data, whatever the data that will be retrieved in our database, it must be converted to a JSON format. So we'll be doing that using, so we'll be defining an array here. So let's say, for example, student array is equal to array, and then student array is equal to array, and then we will be defining the name of the columns and its value. So it is like in associative array format. So array, and then the name of the field. So let's say, let's check our table. So the name of the table or the fields of the table is name and address, sex, course, and also the ID. So let's say we'll just display the value, or we'll just get the value for name and address. So we'll be defining that name, and then the form of associative array. So that's the format. So row, and then of course name, that's the name of the column, comma, then address. So address. Then at the end of our while statement, we'll be displaying, or we'll be converting this array to JSON format using the JSON encode function. It's a built-in function for PHP. So this array will be encoded or will be converted to JSON format. Semicolon. Okay, so what we need to do next is to try to, since what we did here is we're going to display the data using the alert statement. So let's check if it will successfully retrieve the data in our database. So we'll be refreshing our application here. So let's try to refresh. And of course nothing will happen because we didn't call a method. We didn't execute this method to our application. So what we're going to do is we're going to call another property of view, which is the mounted. Okay, so mounted, open, close, then okay, so we'll be calling that, so this dot load student, so that when we load our application, it will automatically execute this load students. Okay, it will automatically execute this method. Okay, so save. So let's just wait. Okay, so it's already finished. Then let's try this. So we have a problem, and the problem is error, network error. So let's check using the inspect. Then console. You will be encountering this problem, the course, the access control allow origin is missing. So all you need to do in order to resolve this problem, if you ever encounter this problem, all you need to do is you need to define a statement here, which is, okay, so you will be defining the header, and we'll just add the allow access control origin to your PHP file, so that that problem will be resolved. So access control allow origin, then asterisk. Then again, let's try to refresh our application. Okay, we're going to refresh that. So let's check what is the output of this application. So you have a problem here. So warning, required DB connect.php failed to open stream, no such file directory. So we have a problem here because we have a wrong spelling, because we only specify .ph to our project. So what we need to do is just to add letter P. So that is my problem, sorry. So let's try to reload our application. Okay, so if you encounter this kind of output, that means it is successfully retrieved the data. But the problem with this is you didn't specify what column you are going to display. So to check that or to correct that statement, all you need to do is to specify the column. So we'll be using the data response.data dot sample name. That's the name of the column of your application. So again, let's try to reload our application. So it is undefined, I think. Okay, so problem is undefined. So let's check our PHP. So the name is name and response.data.name. Okay, let's try to use the index. Okay, 0. Okay, so object, and then try to specify name. Okay, so that means that is the first record, which is 0, and the field that we're going to display is the name. Okay, so we got the value for Jose Rizal. Then let's check our database. So our database contains, or our table contains the name or the value for Jose Rizal. So that's correct. But instead of displaying the data or the information or the data to alert, we'll be displaying that into a list. So what we are going to do is we're going to define an array in our Vue.js or into our Ionic. So let's say the name of the array is load students colon then open brace. Okay, so we have a missing part there, so we forgot to add the return statement. Yeah. Okay, so we have this output. So return these students colon. So next is whatever data that we are going to that will be retrieved to our database. Okay, we'll be storing that to our array. Okay, so in the form of array. So this students is equal to response.data. So that will be the format of our, or that will be the statement that we're going to use. This students is equal to response.data. So this will contain the data that we retrieve to our SQL statement or to our API. Now we'll be storing that to these students. Okay, so we'll be saving that. So we do not have a syntax error now. So this list students will be displayed in our list. Then we'll be using the before statement. Before statement and then we'll be using the variable student in list students. So that's the name of the array. So to be safe, we'll just copy the name of the array. So list students, and then so as a requirement we need to define a key. So key is equal to student.id, for example. And then on our Ion item, we'll be defining the Ion label. And then slash Ion dash label. And then in our Ion label, we'll be adding the element, which is the, or component, which is the Ion dash text. Then Ion dash text. Then we'll be displaying the value for the name, student.name. Okay, so student will represent the row, or the row in an array. So this is a complex array or multi-dimensional array. So each row contains an array also. So student, the student variable will represent each array inside of this student's array. So in one row or in one array, there is a property which is called the name and the address. So let's display first the name column, or the value for the name onto our application. So let's try to save that. And I think we will be encountering a problem later. So let's try first. So, but I'm expecting a problem already. Let's try to refresh that. Okay, so we're not able to display that because we forgot to specify that this one is a variable. Should be replaced. So we need to bind that using this statement. Okay, the double open curly braces. Okay, so unfortunately we didn't have encounter a problem. We're able to display successfully the content of the database. If you want to display also the address of the student, so all you need to do is to define another text, and then we'll just name that into address. So just refresh that. Let's wait to compile, and then so we're able to display the name of the students and the address. So if you want to move the address below the name, so all you need to do is to change this to paragraph. The paragraph tag. So we're able to move the address below the name. So we have Cerizal and the Calamba, Laguna. So let's try to recap our source code, or let's try to review. So in our Ionic file, or into our homepage file, we define a component which is the Ion list, and inside of the Ion list we define an item. So we use before in our item to display the array, the contents of the array. And then in here we imported the Axios to use the Axios library or the Axios statement to our project. So in here we define a method which is the load students. So as you can see, we use the Axios library to retrieve the information from our database. Then whatever data that we get to our API will be stored in an array. So that's the case for the Ionic. So let's check the API that we created, a simple API in PHP. So in here we define we create a simple script that will retrieve the data from our MariaDB database. So we have the connection. We also define the access control allow origin. So to allow the Axios library to read this file, and then we created a simple SQL statement. Select asterisk from table student, and as you can see, we use PDO as our function to retrieve the data from our Maria database. So we define an array here. So each record will be stored in student array, and then after we retrieve all the data that we want to display to our application, we converted that data into JSON format because that is the data requirements for the Axios, the response.data. Okay, so we also have the database. So this is the structure of the database that we have. So the name of the database is CRUD. We have a table student, and table user. So later on, we'll be used that in creating the tutorial for the login. For the meantime, we'll be focusing on the table student. So we have 5 columns. We have the ID, name, address, sex, and course. So we have 2 records, Jose Rizal and Andres Bonifacio. So in this tutorial, we just display the name and the address of the student. So that's all. Thank you for watching. See you on our next videos.